If, like me, you were born in 1987, raised in the 90s, and indeed made it to 2023, then you've lived through 4 decades, 2 centuries, 2 millenniums, and you're not even 40 yet. By the way, I have no idea how to do a Rubik's Cube. However, this video isn't about me. It's about the 1987 G Series and 911 Carrera. And to tell you a little bit more about it, we're going to travel back in time to 1987. So what do we have here? This is the 1987 Porsche Carrera, harbouring a very characterful 3.2 litre flat 6 engine, developing circa 230 brake horsepower, in cassis red, and of course with the whale tail. Before we go any further, can we just appreciate what I'm looking at over here? Is there a more iconic view than that from any driving seat, from any car currently in existence? Maybe a Formula 1 car, that's probably pretty unique. And of course the G-Wagon, because you can still see its indicator lights on each corner. Unmistakably Porsche, and I can confirm that that design language runs well into the 2000s. I know, I've been there. A German sports coupe developing over 200 brake horsepower from a 3.2 litre flat 6. To put that into context, some of the cars that were around in 1987 consisted of things like the Vauxhall Cavalier, Ford Escort, Ford Sierra, yada yada yada. You know where I'm going with this. And of course there are some other sports cars, but around that time those sorts of cars would typically offer you anything between 50 to, if you were lucky, 150 brake horsepower. So this was way ahead of its time. This is way ahead of its time because it's 1987. This particular car has the G50 gearbox, electric windows, and if you spend any length of time on Porsche owners forums or internet, YouTube, you'll know that this was the better gearbox, as this is a later version of the G Series Porsche. Little side note, G Series, my initials, and this car was registered exactly 3 days after I was born. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I am as, or if not a little bit older than this car, but I feel a connection, you know. And Mark did say, who's the owner of this car, that if this video gets to 1 million views, that he would just gift it to me. Okay, he didn't, but I think if it got to 1 million views, I might be able to earn just enough money to be able to buy it. So probably not, but I can dream, right? And what a gearbox. If you didn't tell me that this car was almost 40 years old, I would have never thought it. Yeah, it doesn't feel as taut and as precise as modern gearboxes, obviously, but it's incredibly easy to use. The clutch is actually very, very intuitive. It's not as gradual as what you get in modern cars, but it's thereabouts. Once you drive it for half an hour, and you figure out exactly where that biting point is, it's actually very easy to drive. I was a little bit hesitant because I've never driven anything this old, and certainly not a gearbox this old, but actually 36 years old isn't that old. But you get my point. I was actually a little bit fearful because I thought, how am I going to drive this classic Porsche and be able to speak to the camera all at the same time? But actually, like I said, it's really not as difficult to drive as I thought. Production on this model ran from 1973 all the way through to 1989, and it was available in various different iterations, including the coupe, the convertible, and of course the Targa. Going back to referencing cars by today's standards, this 911 measures a tad over 1.3 meters in width. To put that into context, that's narrower than a Smart 4.2. This thing is tiny. You don't realize how much of a benefit that is when you drive modern cars. and you would never miss it until you actually get in one and drive something so small where I can literally touch the other side of the car, and it just makes it so much more agile and throw around the ball, and just very taut altogether. You can see every corner of the car. The 911s of today measuring at a little over 1.8 meters, so you're looking at, near as makes no difference, a half a meter girthier car. It still feels every bit of Porsche as you would expect, but somehow it's a different experience altogether. What's refreshing is, after coming out of a car like the 992 GTS, which we featured on the channel a few months ago, and more recently the Smart EV, is that those cars are full of tech and driving aids and all the technology that you could expect to have in a modern car. But in this, there is no fighting your lane keeping assist, there's no collision prevention assist, there's no blind spot assist. It's just you, a machine, and pure driving pleasure. I don't know how much horsepower is left from that initial 231 brake horsepower this car had when it was produced, but it still has plenty of go, plenty of torque, and that engine just feels so torquey. Yeah, speed definitely isn't an issue in this. You just have to work ever so slightly harder for it.
Although it's small, its proportions are adequate. See, on modern cars, the A-pillars, the B-pillars are becoming increasingly girthy. The seats are becoming like sofas because of safety regulations and airbags, etc. And that stuff is good, don't get me wrong. But whereas in this, everything is so very thin, there really isn't much to any of it. So visibility is absolutely fantastic, and there is still a good amount of space in here, all things considered.
So with all that in mind, not only are you now closer to the action as a consequence, but you're part of the action. See, in modern cars, be it a 911 or anything else, you get in the car and it's almost like you're sitting on the saddle before you're expected to tame the machine. Whereas in something like this, you get in the car, except there is no saddle. Going bareback, baby. And unsurprisingly, I love that. There's just something very rewarding about taming a machine that doesn't have any driving aids. Think there's no power steering, there's no ABS, there's no stability control in this. It's, like I said before, it's just you and the machine. And as a petrol head, I don't think there's anything more rewarding, more enjoyable, more fulfilling than that. There is something very romantic and nostalgic about driving a Porsche from the 80s. As a generalization, the trajectory of a sports car of late have been a race to the top. The fastest, the quickest, the most powerful, the most technologically advanced. I just never feel that that's sustainable. You're only the fastest until someone faster comes along. You've broken a record around the track. That's only until the next best thing does. And I think as car nuts, we should demand more. Driving something like this just reminds me of simpler times. Yes, clever LED headlights are brilliant, heads-up displays work really, really well, safety systems are really great to have in a car. Don't get me wrong, that stuff is great, but it just reminded me of how much I miss just driving a car and letting the car be the main event. I miss that characterful noise of starting an engine. I miss this interior, and it's just, you've got your radio, you've got your aircon, and really nothing else. I miss beautiful design, as opposed to design that's birthed in wind tunnels and sculpted with bars of soap. There's a few things that changed, don't get me wrong. I mean, the ride is quite stiff, but the seats are so comfortable and so padded that it's far from uncomfortable. I don't do manuals. I mean, in this, I just feel like a driving god. I wish I had more gears. I wanted to keep changing gears. Slow down for a cyclist. Lots of leaves flying everywhere. Oh, into third. There we go. Oh, just listen to that flat six. It's not as bad. I don't know how much the mic is picking up, but it's just pure mechanical goodness. Slow down to third. Foot down. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. If you own a car like this, you should be in it every Sunday. You should be out driving it every Sunday. So Sunday drivers, Sunday traffic should consist of cars from the 70s, 60s, 80s, 90s. No doubt at some point in our lives, I have looked at a piece of artwork or a painting and gone, however much it costs, 100 grand, and we've kind of gone, 100 grand for that, I could paint that. We've all done it, right? We've at least had that thought cross our mind. And here's the thing, art is subjective. One person's gold is another person's trash. Something that someone loves, other person hates. I get that. And for me, this car is very much like that. And as such, I appreciate that we can't all own said piece of artwork. We're not all going to drive around in classic cars. I get that. But there's just, I think, something that maybe we're missing here, because, and I know there's a lot of pressure on manufacturers now to develop hybrids and EVs and all that kind of stuff, but it wouldn't hurt to maybe start simplifying cars again. What's the point of more all the time? More space, more tech, more gadgets, more power, more range, more this, more that. I'd just love for a manufacturer to just bring out a car that just maybe brings this back. Maybe I'm a bit dewy-eyed, maybe that's a silly thing to say, but just caught a glimpse of it on a shop front. If you compare this car to another car by today's standards, it would come off worse in every possible metric. Yet it has more character than any modern car of today, and I will die on that hill. It's very difficult to script anything for this car because I had no prior experience about what it was going to be like, what it was going to be like to drive, and I just had to sort of get some of the headline features on it, and everything I've mentioned in this video has just been from first-hand experience and straight from the heart. I've fallen head over heels in love with it. It's just such a cliche, but it has just got so much character. I should have really bought the cliche pot in here. Porsche 911 cliche pot. I would have racked up a few quid. What was once cutting edge technology back in 1987 has evolved into a charming simplicity by today's standards, making the 911 a revered classic that many petrol heads, including myself, yearn for. In a modern era dominated by complex EVs, rear-wheel steering SUVs, and complicated hypercars that do all sorts of smart stuff using electricity, the 1987 Porsche 911 served as a reminder of a more purer, more visceral driving experience that enthusiasts still crave, making it a cherished icon in the ever-evolving tapestry of automotive history. And that's why for me it's state of the art. I've only got a few more moments with this piece of art before I have to return it, so stick around if you want to, but I'm going to drive now.